Good morning and welcome to the second day of the Bled Strategic Forum. This morning, two political panels are taking place. The first one will address the importance of intercultural dialogue in the Mediterranean, while the title of the second panel, starting at 11 o'clock, is Development is a Global Partnership. The moderator of the first panel is Professor Dr. Abdelhamid El-Zuhairi, President of the Euro-Mediterranean University in Porto Roche and Professor at Cairo University, Faculty of Medicine. Serving as Senior Policy Advisor to the Egyptian Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research and Executive Director of the Research Development Initiative Program, he acquired extensive experience in initiating and managing Euro-Mediterranean partnerships in education and research. He is former president of the Heliopolis University, Cairo, and the founding president of FEMIA, an international association for innovation in the Euro-Mediterranean region. The EMUNI University was set up in 2008 as one of the 6 flagship projects of the Union for the Mediterranean. It is a unique enterprise in its function as a network of universities, research institutes, research centers, and centers of excellence. With more than 200 members from 42 countries, EMUNI is building cultural, scientific, and educational bridges between the north, south, the east, and the west of the Mediterranean. And it is for this reason that I believe that we are up for an interesting debate. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Dr. El-Zuhairi, and the panelists. Please, Dr. El-Zuhairi.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, and welcome to this important panel on the 10th anniversary of the Bled Strategic Forum, Bridges of the Mediterranean, the Power of Intercultural Dialogue. Going through one of the most difficult periods in the past 2 decades, fraught with many challenges, the Mediterranean is once again at the center of international political attention. The increasingly louder calls and demands for freedom, dignity, and justice have been a new reality in the region and is still striving to create a common area of peace, stability, and prosperity. In this context, intercultural dialogue based on shared values and mutual respect among the citizens of the Mediterranean countries remains an important tool for bridging the gap between the countries on the opposite sides of the Mediterranean. Intercultural dialogue should be used to help overcome cultural divides and violence and deal with migration, regressive social trends, and radicalization. It should be a complementary element of a comprehensive long-term strategy for tackling the root of cause of political ideologies and social crises in the region. Today we have an esteemed group of panelists from different international organizations, and I think we are looking forward to an enriched discussion on intercultural dialogue and how to bridge differences in the Mediterranean. I would like to present my panelists now. I will start from this side. We have Professor Ibrahim Saleh Al-Naimi. He's the chairman of the Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue in Qatar. Professor Naimi has a PhD in chemistry from the University of South Carolina, USA. And he was the former president of the University of Qatar and the former president of the University Senate of the Qatar University and the founder and president of the Qatar Scientific Club and Community College. Moving next to Professor Naimi, we have Mr. Anton Peršek, who is the State Secretary in the Ministry of Culture in the Republic of Slovenia. He's a writer, a politician, a theater director, and a journalist. He's also a previous member of the Slovenian National Assembly and president of Slovene Writers Association and former mayor of Trzin. Moving this side, we have from Malta, Honorary A.M. Borg. He's a member of the parliament, He's Parliamentary Secretary for the EU Presidency 2017 and the EU funds in the Ministry of European Affairs and implementation of the Electoral Manifesto of the Republic of Malta. He is the youngest member of the executive in the current legislature in Malta. Is that right? No one younger came in? And he has a PhD in law from University of Malta. He's responsible for preparation of Malta's presidency of the Council for the presidency of the EU Council in 2017 and improving the country's ability to absorb EU funds and adding transparency. Previously, he was mayor of Had Dingley, executive member of the local council association, and served in North Regional Committees and Users Committee of the Malta Environment and Planning Authority, and also member of the Maltese delegation of the Committee of the Regions of the EU. And then we move to His Excellency, Ambassador William Lacey Swing, Director General of the International Organization for Migration. He graduated from Yale University in USA and did some postgraduate studies in Tübingen, Germany. Previously held a number of ambassadorial posts, mostly in African countries, including South Africa during and after the end of the apartheid regime. His deputy director, he also was deputy director for Central African Affairs and country officer for Zaire at the Department of State, fellow at Harvard University, specially representative of the UN, Secretary General for Western Sahara and chief of mission for referendum in Western Sahara. Also, he held the UN Special Representative for the Democratic Republic of Congo and led all facets of the largest UN peacekeeping operation in history. Of course, all our members today have several awards. In the interest of time, I'm trying to skip the awards, so please forgive me. And then we're also very happy to have Commissioner Dr. Tibor Navracsics. He's the European Commissioner for Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. He has a PhD in political sciences. He was the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Minister of Public Administration and Justice, Minister of Hungarian Parliament, Head of Press and Information Departments in the Prime Minister's Office, and Associate Professor for Political Sciences. And then we move to Madam Minister, Dr. Maja Makovic-Brencic. She's Minister for Education, Science and Sports for the Republic of Slovenia. Previously, among other positions, she's a professor for international business and vice rector of the University of Ljubljana for knowledge transfer. She was also the vice dean for development at Faculty of Economics, University of Ljubljana, president of the European Marketing Academy, president of Slovenian Association for Marketing, vice president of Marketing Council of the Slovenian Olympic Committee. And from there, we move to, sorry, because I don't have the same order, so I have to get the names. I'm very sorry for that. Yes. Ms. Marjutka Hafner, she's the Secretary General of the Slovenian National Commission for, sorry, I'm very sorry. You see, this happens when you don't have the same order. Of course, you have, I'm very sorry. Okay. Ms. Delphine Borion, Deputy Secretary General for Social and Civil Affairs at the Union for the Mediterranean. She holds a BA in Business Law, postgraduate in Contemporary History and Sciences Po. Previously, she held a number of ambassadorial posts for France, worked on environmental issues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, joined the World Food Programme, worked in the Balkans on humanitarian assistance operations for refugees from Kosovo, and with the UN mission in Kosovo, was responsible for preparation of the G8 and held several posts at the presidential office, and was director of cultural policy and French language in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France. And then we have Mr. Mohammed Azin Schleifer. He's the State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Tunisia. He studied in Tunisia and in French and graduated from the University of Aix-Marseille 3, with a master's degree in international law and a PhD in land planning. Joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1983 and served as diplomat in Spain and Washington. Also served as ambassador in South Africa, Australia, and Spain, and in Washington. Previously, also he was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Director General for American and Asian Affairs. And then, last but not least, we have Ms. Mariutka Hafner, the Secretary General of the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO. And she also, among others, she addresses some globalization channels and supports UNESCO activities in promoting South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation. And one of her strategic goals is to enhance cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, and culture of peace. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests today. So, since we are tight in time, we have to finish exactly at 10:30. So this is how the panel would go. I have agreed with the panelists that we will start with addressing some questions to the panelists. They will take short time in answering those questions. And then the second half of the panel, we will start opening the floor for comments or questions or any suggestions that you may have, and then we will have some conclusion remarks. So I would like to start by saying that today's panel focused on intercultural dialogue across the Mediterranean comes amid very specific times where thousands of refugees are fleeing for their lives from areas of conflict like Syria, Iraq, and other areas along the south of the Mediterranean. And they are coming to Europe, putting a lot of pressure, we all can understand, on the local communities that sometimes are very small and cannot handle this influx of refugees. On the other hand, Europe is struggling to deal with the problems, and we understand the magnitude of such problems, but also having the refugees just come in and settling in Europe is not the ultimate goal, because what are we going to do after? What are we going to do after having the refugees come? Are we prepared to provide them with proper education, health care system? Are we prepared to integrate them in communities? Are we prepared to house them? I think there's a lot of issues here, but maybe one of the main issues for today's panel is how can Europe provide education for all those refugees that are coming in? It is an important question, and here I would like to direct my first question to Commissioner Navracsics, because he's the commissioner responsible for education, culture, youth, and sports. So I think among his portfolio is a very important role for what Brussels is providing as support mechanism for the Mediterranean countries. So we can support the southern Mediterranean countries with working with partnership with education without having refugees, and what can we do when the refugees come, if there are any programs to allow for integrating those refugees in European universities. There are Erasmus Plus, we all know, is a very important program, and I would like to listen from the Commissioner what are the instruments that could help in tackling this issue.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Certainly, one might think that I'm an important actor only in longer-term solutions of that issue, but I would argue that that my portfolio is an essential part of the short-term solution as well. Just because that issue, which is the most important at the moment in the Mediterranean area and in whole Europe and in the relations between the EU and other neighboring countries and political systems, the problem of migration, the waves of migration, the growing importance of political extremism the political terrorism in some countries have a common background, and that's the background of the intercultural dialogue, or the absence of the intercultural dialogue, and in that case, as a consequence, the cultural conflicts among communities with different cultural background. And I think education, youth, and even sports policy can be an enormous and very powerful vehicle in the integration of different communities with divergent cultural background. And intercultural dialogue can be a good platform and a good solution for easing those conflicts. That's why we had a European Year of Intercultural Dialogue 7 years ago. And that's why the European Commission established a working group headed by the then Slovenian Culture Minister, working on new methods and new solutions for intercultural dialogue, for developing a new dialogue inside the member states, because we have minorities, we have majorities. There are some problems in the relations between minorities and majorities. For instance, in Slovenia, there was a very good initiative called Roma Invited to the Libraries. And there are other examples in other member states. And the European Commission can facilitate those projects, those movements, and those initiatives. I think if we take the growing importance of my portfolio, because that portfolio, education, culture, youth, and sport, started probably as just a symbolic gesture toward the member states, as a symbol of our common European identity. But in recent years, as we just witnessed the sad consequences of the Paris attacks, Copenhagen attacks, or in Brussels, the anti-Semitic incidents, we can say that it is a strategic portfolio from the point of view of the future of European integration, not only as the home affairs of the European integration, but as a part of the neighborhood policy of the European Union as well. Because culture is a platform for the dialogue among nations, among different countries, among different cultures. And that's why we developed new methods and new instruments to support those initiatives. For instance, the Erasmus Plus you just mentioned, which is the most important and probably the most popular project of the European integration, which can support the idea of the common European identity inside the EU and outside the EU, because Erasmus Plus, students' mobility, and enhanced cooperation among higher education institutions, among researchers, among students, can be a good foundation for a future peaceful coexistence of the European and the Mediterranean nations as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I'd like to direct my question to Dr. Maja Benčić. Madam Minister, you have, and here I'm quoting you, you have said one time, in the spirit of contemporary open cooperation, collaboration across national borders is ever more important. This is why I support mobility, intercultural dialogue, tolerance, and understanding of differences. I think you had this statement at the International Day of Youth. So I would like to ask you, how is the Slovenian Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports preparing itself for mobility programs, for this exchange, which you has deemed very important, between the different cultures and between the different countries, both students and faculty members across the Mediterranean?
Thank Thank you for this question, and thank you for the invitation. Today we have the first school year, a school day in this year's year of the schools at primary and the secondary level. So it's really the day, and therefore the symbolic meaning also about the topic of intercultural and general culture issues, which we talk about here at the Blatt Forum. Yes, we are at the education system and through the schools and of course through the curricula responsible to bring in enough of the knowledge and at the same time enough of, I can say, education about the diversity in the world. And the platform is actually the cultural platform. So this is where we try to be a part as Slovenia, not only through youth, but generally in instruments which are developed already and will be even further, like Erasmus+, like different programs within Horizon 2020, like different Mediterranean connections we have created, like different options when we create new study programs together among different countries and among regions. And this is where we see a good platform of, I would say, not only for the students, but also for children, for youth generally, to start understanding the diversity. As we say, there is nothing different than only the respect to this diversity. And this is where we have to work. We have to work bringing in the respect, the trust, the understanding of it. And I think that we all agree very much that the instruments which have been introduced by the European Commission and those which are already implemented at the regional level are those which can help really a lot from the preschool to the top level, even to the doctoral level of studies. Slovenia as such has entered in many of these initiatives, and we will do that further. Where we have already worked a lot is, of course, bringing in the youth voice, like the Governmental Council for Youth, like Special Office for Youth, where we think that this structural dialogue about the diversity, understanding of it, at the same time intercultural dialogue, and of course different aspects and also knowledges about it should be one of the major topics, and it actually is. And as presented at the councils of the ministers and also wider, when the youth gathers, I think that the voice was quite clearly heard. Absolutely, where we start to implement these ideas and instruments, it's practically at the local level. Being a small country, we do have some advantages from this respect. Young people and generations can be closer together in understanding new phenomena. And maybe this is where we have to connect more the local, national, and regional towards European perspective about understanding the intercultural dialogue. And these were the topics which were already addressed, and I'm pretty sure that they will be developed further. You have mentioned the Emuni University, the gatherings, the new programs which have been developed, like program on communication, which is of course a major link, a major thread also in sense of bringing in the understanding of differences or intercultural dialogue. And I think that these are the initiatives and existing ways of bringing us all together. I think the trust on one side and not being afraid or not being too scared about differences is something what we are trying to teach, learn, and understand. Maybe this could be the common language we should all co-create for the future of Europe.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And you have raised an important issue here that maybe intercultural dialogue should be started to be taught at schools. Before, maybe it's too late to wait until we are at the universities and start teaching intercultural dialogue. It should be taught and practiced even at schools. And the mobility does not start with the university, it should start earlier, actually. And you've also mentioned trust. And trust is an important word. And here I would like to direct my question to Mr. Mohammed Schleife, the State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tunisia. maybe it's a compound question. First is, how can we build trust working with, of course, your view from the south of the Mediterranean? There is no intercultural dialogue without trust. How can we help build trust if it's absent, or build more trust, or build stronger bridges of trust across the Mediterranean? This is the first part, and the second part is what Tunisia is doing, because Tunisia, I think, now is regarded as a successful, maybe is the only successful model emerging from the Arab Spring. And in this regard, I'm sure Tunisia is doing a lot in reaching out to its neighbors, whether in the south or the north. So we'd like to know from you some of the initiatives that are being done.
Thank you. Of course, Tunisia is building trust with EU and a traditional partner of European Union. We are working with the European Union on political, economic, and cultural issues. And for building trust, we are now discussing with the European Union the new neighborhood policy in order to rethink this policy, in order to balance between the Mediterranean neighborhood and the Eastern neighborhood, in order to have a comprehensive neighborhood policy. We are working with EU in order to for the Mediterranean, in order to enhance and strengthen the role of some institutions dealing with the Mediterranean, like the Union for the Mediterranean, like the 5+5 process, and also like the Anna-linked institution, which is important. And these institutions need more means and more visibility in order to play a role in this bridging differences between across the Mediterranean. Also, we are discussing with EU on the major problem for Europe now, the migration. And we are, because in Tunisia we are perceiving the migration as a solution, not as a problem, but of course legal migration. And to tackle this problem, we need a comprehensive approach. The security measures and the quota system will not tackle this problem. We need a more comprehensive approach with, of course, security measures, but humanitarian measures, economic measures. We have to regulate the legal migration. Of course, we have to improve economic and social situation in some region which has a big potential for migration. We have to stabilize some countries and some conflicts. This comprehensive approach, I think, and concerted approach, we can find a solution for this problem. And of course, we are discussing with Europe our program on Erasmus, and we are doubling now our program in Erasmus, because it's very important to have the people-to-people exchange, and young-to-young exchange is very important. And also we think that tourism across the Mediterranean is paramount, is very important. Not tourism as industry or as business activities, but tourism as a tool and a vector and a cultural vector. This is, I think, all the issues we are discussing with Europe, and we will have in October negotiation to have an ALECA and a new free trade agreements, but more we have to enlarge our free trade agreement, and we will have in October too this discussion and negotiation on mobility, and we will try to share with Europe our approach and our sensitivity from the south of the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have mentioned migration, and this will definitely take us to Ambassador Swing. I don't think there's anyone in this room capable of talking about this issue. And maybe here I would like to use this opportunity. Of course, the hot topic today is the refugee crisis in Europe, particularly coming from Syria. And I would like to use this opportunity of your presence here to maybe guide us. Because I read a statement for you once saying that, which I maybe echoed in the beginning, just having the migrants and dealing with them individually will not help. We need to prepare them. There's a lot of work taking them in. So maybe you would help us understand what are the problems that are coming after and how Europe can best deal with them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished panel, distinguished delegates. It's a great honor to be with you today on this extremely important issue that our colleagues have discussed so well this morning in a very eloquent presentation. Let me start, I might make 3 points. Let me start by saying, and this may surprise you, that I am surprised at how surprised everyone is that so many people are coming north. We are living in a period of unprecedented human mobility. 1 billion migrants in the world. 1 of every 7 persons is in a migratory status. Secondly, we are in a period of unprecedented humanitarian emergencies and disasters. I have been a diplomat for about 50 years now, and I have to say, I don't remember a similar period in which we've had so many simultaneous complex emergencies from the western bulge of Africa to Asia, with very few bright spots in between. Ebola in the Mana River Union of West Africa, Boko Haram in Nigeria in the neighborhood, an ongoing 40-year war in Somalia, unfinished business in Libya and Yemen, Afghanistan, Iraq, 5th year of war in Syria, Ukraine, and I won't mention any others. I may have missed some. In addition to that, I am unaware of any current active negotiations or viable political process that can give any of us any hope of a short to medium term solution of any of these. Now, so then if you put with that abject poverty, a growing disparity between global north and global south, and a few other natural disasters in between, you don't need to ask why are people seeking refuge. And we must not have refugee amnesia. We must not forget how the Indo-China crisis ended, with the Vietnamese and others being brought to safety. Europe's own experience after the Second World War, which is why we were created in the first place, to help take people not on smugglers' boats, but on good ships, to safe harbors in other parts of the world. So I guess we're in the middle then of a kind of a perfect storm, because we're also in a period of unprecedented anti-migrant and almost anti-foreign sentiment. And this is why this dialogue is so important, because I think the forces are such that we are facing inexorable multicultural, multireligious, multi-ethnic diversity in our countries. If we cannot change the narrative, which at present is absolutely toxic, if we cannot help governments and peoples to understand and manage this growing intercultural diversity, we will ultimately fail. And the failure will be in the continuing loss of life. We've already lost 3,250 people this year by last count. That's more than all that were lost last year in the Mediterranean and now in the Western Balkans. So I think it's a very serious topic you've chosen. I'm very grateful to you for it. I'll make two other points very quickly. The driving forces make it absolutely clear that at least until the second part of the century, you're going to have large-scale migration. But we must keep it in perspective. 320,000 people who've come north this year are going into a population area of 500 million. I don't make light of it, Mr. Commissioner, but you and I know, and from our conversations in Brussels, that there is a way to manage this issue. If we see it not as a problem to be solved, but a human reality to be managed, the more positive approach, I think, as the distinguished minister from Tunisia was saying, a comprehensive long-term approach linked with the short-term measures you're taking, then I think we will get there. There are many ways to go about it. I think we have to do more in terms of public information, public education, awareness raising. People have fears. They fear for the loss of work from the 2008-2009 economic downturn. They fear what came from Charlie Hebdo, that any tourist may actually be a terrorist. They have fear of the loss of personal identity or national identity. And we have to help people to deal with these fears. And it can only come through dialogue, the Alliance of Civilization, Global Forum on Migration and Development, and other structures. The good dialogue that the European Union is going to have in Malta, in Valletta, in November. These are the Horn of Africa Migration Initiative, the so-called Khartoum process. All of these things are in the right direction. We just need to do more of them. I'm sorry, I'm a bit long.
Not at all, sir. Actually, I would like to quote you again here, saying in 2009, an estimated 214 million international migrants in the world, counting refugees, labor migrants, their families, students, and young professionals, etc. I have made a point that if these people were constituted as a nation, it would be the 5th most populous nation in the world. I think today we have many more migrants. This number is increasing. And so the magnitude of this problem cannot be more highlighted. And this will take us to Malta, because Malta is having the EU presidency in 2017. And again, I liked very much how you started, Ambassador Swing, your intervention by saying you're surprised about the surprise. And so as not to be surprised again in 2017, I would like to ask Honorary Ian Borg from Malta, what is Malta preparing from now on? Because as evident, this problem is not going to stop, and there will be more need to tackle this problem with more force and more coordination between EU member states. So as preparing for the Maltese presidency in 2017, could you please share with us what Malta is preparing in this regard?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also for the invitation. I appreciate a lot the comprehensive picture which Ambassador Swing just gave. Of course, Maltese are not so surprised, because we've been dealing sometimes also on our own with this humanitarian tragedy for the last 10 years, and therefore, if anything, we are surprised that like Ambassador Swing, that some other parts of the world are now realizing how tragic is this issue. I also liked the intervention from the State Secretary of Tunisia, and that is why also such dialogues are of crucial importance, because basically North and South of the Mediterranean region are talking the same language, and this is the comprehensive view which we would like to discuss and also realizing it through an action plan which start to tackle these big issues, which most probably our generation will not be able to solve in any case. However, yes, we do have instruments, we do have policies. We do not need to reinvent the wheel, and that is why I also find it very timely the review of the European Neighbourhood Policy, which High Rep Mogherini and also Commissioner Hahn initiated. Member states and also other countries in the Mediterranean region gave their input, and now we look forward for the autumn Commission's proposal in this regard. And this is something which our presidency, trio presidency, together with the Dutch and the Slovaks, which we will be presiding after Luxembourg as of next January, we will give its due importance, because since its enactment in 2004, and we have no doubts to believe that there was all the good intentions and goodwill to make it happen, but it's also true that for several reasons, again mentioned by Ambassador Swing, today we have a ring of fire, starting from Ukraine till Libya, and definitely we have to review that policy. We have to keep it a single policy. And whilst the security is still a very pressing issue, I agree with the Commissioner that we have to look beyond security, and also the diversity mentioned by the Slovenian minister, and the mobility should feature strongly in this review of the policy, tackling also youth unemployment and the mobility not only of the students but also of the civil society representatives. It's crucial, whilst also once again already referred to by the State Secretary of Tunisia, a better synergy between the already existing mechanisms in the region. The 5+5, the EU-LAS, which was launched during Slovenian presidency with the Malta initiative, back with the Foreign Affairs Ministries meeting in Malta back in February 2008, something which we would like to convene again during our presidency, and of course the Union for the Mediterranean. So I think that also the common sense which was called for by President Tusk yesterday during the opening debate is crucial. Of course, this of course does not mean that we have to control our neighboring countries and their internal politics. That would be a disaster. We were all witnesses to the fact that the international community went down on Libya to kill the tyrant Gaddafi, but then where was the international community to help the Libyan people reconstruct the democratic institutions and assist them to build once again their civil society? And therefore that is why also as Malta we would like to commend and thank Ambassador Special Envoy of the United Nations Bernardino Leon in his efforts to reach an agreement between the factions in Libya, because Libya, like Tunisia and like all the other North of Africa countries, they are part of the solution and they are not the problem. I mean, they are not even the source of the problem, because migrants are using these countries as a transit to reach the European shores, and for sure with a good economy in Tunisia and all the other neighboring countries in the north of Africa, also they will speak the same language like Angela Merkel, that we also need some migrants for our growing economies, and therefore forums like this gives us the space to understand each other and listen to each other, because sometimes we like to talk too much. Thank you.
Thank you. you mentioned the interventions of President Tusk yesterday. They were really interesting. I don't think we'll have time to discuss, but that was a very interesting panel, the leaders panel of yesterday. Madame Bourrion, the UFM is a very important player there. But there are also many actors. And I would like to quote what you've said. It's in French, so you said the transformations and the revolutions of the Arabs has showed us very well that we cannot only focus our cooperation on the governments, on the states. There are other actors that are important for the stability and the continuity of the society. I would like you to maybe explain to me the actors in this Euro-Mediterranean cooperation and what the UFM is doing to engage those other actors. And I have another question for you, since we will not have time for a second round of questions. Considering all these challenges in the region, the problem of migration, refugees, and the violence and terrorism, do you think bi-regional cooperation is going down? Is it at least not being enhanced? And if so, what are the challenges that are facing us? I know it's a compound question, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your invitation indeed to a very, very important discussion, because I think the drama and the tragedy that we see really calls our conscience, calls our values, and calls our capacity to act. And that's really what we need to focus. What response can we collectively provide? And we were talking about trust, we were talking about dialogue, we are talking also about development and addressing also the long-term issues and the causes, the causes of this migration or terrorism. So to respond to your question in a very short time, the Union for the Mediterranean, which is this intergovernmental organization with all the EU members, and it is co-chaired by the European Union, and all the countries, southern and eastern countries of the Mediterranean, try to bring a regional response by fostering regional cooperation and integration to fostering peace and prosperity and development. And our priority really is to work with youth, because that's the future of the region and that's the response. Focusing on sustainable development, and we know also, we didn't talk about that, but in relation to migration, the climate change will pose dramatic challenge in the future. We focus also on women, because they are also a very important part of the response. And of course, education, and Emuni is an example of the project we support, education, mobility, higher education, research, and of course, development of business and employment. So this regional dimension, I think, is very important. And the response is, of course, we act, we have projects, and we work with many actors, indeed. States, of course, are very important, but all the international organizations, but private sector, which have a very important say also in all providing these responses to the youth, to employment, to the development. Also, all the actors, the parliamentaries, with different, the European Parliament, Union for the Mediterranean Parliament Assembly, all the local authorities also, they all have the say. And what we try to do is to bring all together for having a platform for cooperation. And to address this issue of intercultural dialogue, which of course is so important, is a kind of a backbone of all our activities also, we have organized, with many actors, and indeed some of you were there in July, a meeting with the European Union, with the Anna Lindh Foundation for the Cultural Dialogue, with KAICID, the King Abdullah Center for Intercultural and Religious Dialogue, and the Alliance for Civilization. And the issue which came out of this meeting is we need to invest on women and youth by education, by leadership, by providing them a voice. We need also to counter the narrative, indeed, of extremism, of radicalism. And we need really to support all voices, young voices or others, which can provide another voice to play advocating for pluralism, for tolerance, for the living together. And we need also to enhance the capacity of institutions to act collectively, because there are regional challenges, there are global challenges, and the response cannot be national. It has to be also, of course, national, but also regional and also cross-national. So that is the response that we try to provide. And just to finish quickly, I'd like to, I love this sentence that Abraham Lincoln used, by talking about the cost of all this action. He was saying, for those who think that education is too costly, try ignorance.
Thank you very much. This is a very good way to end the intervention. And I would like now to move to Professor Naimi. Professor Naimi, he believes very much in interfaith dialogue, and this is what his center is doing. And one of the major problems that face our societies, and I'm quoting you, is the lack of communication between peoples of religions. Although there are many similarities between heavenly religions, Muslim, Christians, and Jews, scholars have to sit with each other and negotiate about how to overcome challenges, assist each other during disasters, and prevent wars. Interfaith dialogue is very important. It's an important central aspect to intercultural dialogue, and it is much needed now. I also know that your center is also encouraging cooperation among young Muslim scientists. So here we come to what are the initiatives that your center is having for interfaith dialogue in general, and particularly, let's say, South-South cooperation, because this is a very important aspect of North-South cooperation, is to have cooperation among the southern countries themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to be here with this wonderful panels here. And I think when we talk about inter-dialogue or interfaith dialogue, it is part of the intercultural dialogue. It is, we talked about it this morning, but we find from our center has been established for almost 10 years now, and we had started conducting an annual conference, international conference on interfaith since 2003. We found that we need to talk to each other. We need to explore. I think I would like to resonate with Ms. Bourgeon. Yeah, she mentioned earlier about how to empower women in interfaith dialogue, how to empower children and try to understand the others, and that's what we do. And we also try to reach out to the world and go to those places where there are conflicts and try to help in establishing some kind of dialogue. I can mention that in 2009 we were in Sarajevo, and we held a conference there called, I have to call the name because I forgot the name, the title of it was The Role of Education in Promoting Global Peace and Tolerance in Southeast Europe. And we invited Serbs to Bosnia for the first time after the war. And it was a wonderful gathering for the Balkan people to get together and discuss how can they use their differences in order to to overcome these differences and to establish a new life for their children through education. So this is one of the things. We also went to in the Arab world to Lebanon, where Lebanon still has its own problems between the different factions, and we tried to bring all the different mosaic of that country together and to discuss among themselves how can they use the interfaith dialogue for the best of their country. I think we try to do a lot in different parts of the world within Qatar, and for example, our next conference will talk about the same issue that we're talking about, the challenge that we're facing nowadays. It's not only in regarding migration, but the terrorism in our minds and our brains and our intellectuals. How can we deflect these ideas that our children are facing? Our next issue of our journal will be focused on the women and women interfaith and interculture, and I wish probably you can write an article in this issue next, which is going to come out in December. So Qatar itself is supporting the South-South interaction or dialogue, and Qatar is going to hold in the 15th of this conference, September 15th, the Arab, Iberian, or South American conference on human rights, and our center is going to be part of that conference. So we're trying to touch upon many subjects that really to help the whole world to come to peace, to build peace, and so this is our mission in the center, is to be platform to build peace through that center.
Thank you very much, Professor Naini. And I also witnessed some activities of Qatar that bring in the youth together in a very positive competition. It's called Stars of Science, and I'm a member of the jury there, where the young Arab inventors who have inventions are all supported by the Qatar Foundation, and they have a competition across the Arab world. It's really a very positive competition, and we need more of this to get youth working together, not only between the EU and the South Mediterranean or Arab Middle Eastern countries, but also between the region and itself, because we have to build a strong network to be able to cooperate on equal footage. Talking about intercultural dialogue, I will go now to Mr. Pershek. When we talk about intercultural dialogue, we're not talking about blending cultures in each other. Of course, each culture has its specificity. So I think you are more capable of answering this question. How can we achieve mutual understanding and cooperation, but still keeping each culture's specificity? What are the instruments there?
On the beginning, you mentioned the lack of trust. And lack of trust is also a reason for lack of intercultural dialogue. But it's paradox that the best way to how to get the trust is intercultural dialogue. But what is intercultural dialogue? It's the intercultural exchange of cultural goods. If you read some novels, for example, some Arabic novels, you get the knowledge about Arabic words. For example, I got the most knowledge about Arabic thinking, I believe, from Amin Malouf and from other books. And so that I believe that the programs of translation, programs of festivals, programs of other kinds of collaborations, or the best way to get to know each other and to get the trust. Why? Because if you know somebody and in watching the films, reading the books, as I said, it's the best way to know somebody. You cannot hate him so much if you know him. You cannot afraid of him so much. And so I believe that the main task for all of us is to support the cultural exchange. I'm sure that the success of Iranic film and also Palestine film helped to the dialogue with Iran, for example. And let me mention also my experience, which I have as a member of PEN International. We spent many years to put, for example, the Israeli writers and Palestine writers to the same table, and to achieve that they began to talk about their relations. We succeeded it also with writers, Kurdish writers and Turkish writers. And they began to talk. But in the beginning, when Israeli writers started to talk, Palestinians left the room, maybe first time, and so on. But why is this so important? Because writers, essayists, or the main opinion leaders in their countries, in their environments, and when also their readers read their books, they got the knowledge which they had. And so I'm sure that if we stimulate all these kinds of cultural exchange, we do the best for how to get the knowledge about ourselves and how to collaborate. But it's very important also, and I will conclude with this, in school programs. We still have the programs which express, for example, the superiority of Western civilization. We still have the programs which are maybe not oriented to the real tolerance. And if we have to learn to teach our pupils that if we try to get dialogue, that the first point and the most important point is to think that maybe my partner has the right, not us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You raised important issues. I wish we have time to come to this later. I will open the floor after the last question here, so just please prepare the mics. Very shortly I will come. Ms. Hafner, please just highlight to us shortly what is the National Committee of UNESCO in Slovenia doing in this in the area of intercultural dialogue.
Thank you for your question, but first let me elaborate just very shortly, very briefly on what UNESCO on general is doing, because this is what we are then doing in Slovenia and also in partnership with other national commissions. First of all, I would just like to remind all of us that UNESCO was established after the Second World War for a very, very serious reason. Mainly, it is said also in the preamble to the Constitution of UNESCO that lasting peace is not achievable only by political means. And this is the crucial, I think this is crucial, and that's why UNESCO was founded as an organization for intellectual, scientific, cultural, and educational cooperation and solidarity. And I would also like to say that maybe the last 20-25 years, since early 90s, when we started to discuss in different fora, multilateral, like UNESCO, Alexa, ISESCO, Council of Europe, United Nations, the platforms, different programs and different activities for dialogue among civilizations, dialogue among cultures, religions, and so on and so on. You can pick, you can choose and pick the name. We have been limited only to answering to the Huntington's thesis on the clash of civilizations. So we were looking for similarities instead of explaining the differences. And this is, I think, these were 2 or maybe 2.5 lost decades in the intercultural dialogue. Second, what I would like to say is that the problem of these platforms is also dialogue by proxy. The representatives are discussing the issues at hand. So what we are doing as national commissions, maybe I can say that we have established in 2001 the task force for Euro-Arab dialogue, because it was immediately after the events of the 9/11, and it was at the conference, IBA conference, and this task force has European and Arab countries involving into discussing the potential activities for enhancing intercultural dialogue and for reaching conclusions. What are the best tools for translating intercultural dialogue into practice and translating the intercultural dialogue into political agenda? Because the main problem that was really pursued was that politicians often translated the political perception of their voters into the agenda, and it's not vice versa. They do not put agenda first and then try to persuade the people. So what is one of the main activities we were working on was the finding educational tools for teaching cultural diversity. This is a non-existing, they do not exist. There's a lot of work being put into a lot of effort being put into finding the right educational tool for teaching cultural diversity, but we are still on a level of concept. Hopefully, with the help of UNESCO and Algebra Foundation, we will be able to produce a toolkit that will be joint effort of Arab and European experts in teaching the teachers, training the trainers. And second, what I would like to emphasize is that we have produced some volumes of comparative analysis of history and literature textbooks in European and Arab Muslim countries, mostly looking into how the other side is represented in the history and literature textbooks, because this is also one of the most important issues, as you mentioned that, Mr. Pershak, that we do not explain, we do not teach the achievements of the other, we do not explain the differences, and we do not try to find common grounds. And for the conclusion, what I would like to say is that different rights or different concepts like human rights, rights to education, women empowerment, civil society empowerment, cannot be just taken for granted. They have to be translated into a functionally equivalent in different cultural environments. And this, I think, is the essence of the intercultural dialogue. And that's what we are trying to do as UNESCO on the national and also on the global level.
Thank you very much, Ms. Apna. Thank you. Pointed very important initiatives that you're working on. We have now 20 minutes left. So for 15 minutes, we will have questions or comments, and then we'll see how we can wrap up in 5 minutes. So this will be a challenge. There's one question here, one mic here, please. Yes. Okay, and then there's one in the back. Please give him the mic too. You're the next. We start here in the front.
Thank you. Thank you. Just I have 2 comments because I was speaking about...
Try again.
Yes. Thank you. I think the Vice Minister of Tunisia, who is my boss, spoke about Tunisia, the genuine departing from a culture, from an history of 3,000 that was offering the dialogue with Europe, because departing from an internal experience. Because we have had in Tunisia, as he said, our intercultural dialogue and our dialogue internal. That's why I am directing to our friends, panelists from the north of the Mediterranean, because they are speaking about bridges in the Mediterranean, intercultural dialogue, interfaith dialogue, which is a good thing. And I think Madam Minister spoke about education, which is also a good thing, but in the medium and long term. Because before that, what is happening in the societies, in the country of the north of the Mediterranean, there is this amalgam between, let's say, one religion, one faith, and terrorism. My question is this will help that intercultural dialogue? The answer is evident, but I want to listen to hear it from the panelists, because this is now, we have to tackle that one. The countries, they have to have their internal dialogue to resolve that problem first. You see, that's the biggest problem. The second problem, in those countries, because you tackled the problem from the migrant, the new wave of migrant and refugees. But let's take the old waves, the second and third generation of migrants. They are citizens of those countries. Do we believe? Of course, we have no problem, our Tunisian community, because they are well integrated, because they are open and they are integrated in all the European societies. But if you take other communities, you will see they are unrooted. They don't feel, even there, they are citizens, but they feel rejected in their countries of the north. When they come back to their country of the origin, also they feel unrooted, they feel stranger. You have to resolve that problem first. Because resolving those problems, then it comes to education. This conception, this misconception about this will help the inter-dialogue, especially now this amalgam between one religion. And let's say it frankly about Islam and terrorism. This is a bad thing now. It's happening in the world, and this is what deepen all the problems that we have, and it will make it difficult for the inter. I will give an example. For example,
Mr. Ambassador, for the interest of time, I'm sorry, but we have very little time. Back there, yes, please introduce yourself and please be very short. And then please.
Yes, my name is Antti Pentikäinen and I'm convening a network for UN of religious and traditional peacemakers, and we work with Professor Ibrahim Naimi's institutions, KCID and Alliance of Civilizations, for example. I did like Ambassador Swing's analysis, but I don't think it was fully acknowledged by the panel yet, the magnitude of the changes and the lack of the adequate responses within the current framework that we are having. There was recently a review of books on, New York Review of Books on ISIS, and the author, which was anonymous, which is quite rare in that publication, said that we have to see ISIS in a similar context and as irreversible factor in the region as the Roman Empire was when it was enlarging. And I'll give you a practical example. We work in the front lines with faith leaders where this is happening. Just recently, there was a Salafi leader killed in Mali, very prominent, who was opposing the genocidal agenda of the Islamists there. And after that, what happens is that all those Salafi leaders who oppose them go underground and can't speak publicly. They become the targets. I think the battle for the Mediterranean is happening today in Sirte. Unfortunately, the Libyan friends have not been very forthcoming involving the tribes there. And if they keep on opening the door for ISIS, the battle we see in Syria and Iraq will expand there. Speaking about the magnitude, I would put it in a context with the Arab Spring. I think that was the biggest opportunity of our generation and one of the biggest failures. And I don't think if we step up to this situation, we will see anything better. I'll continue what Minister just said on seeing Islam and comparison between Islam and terrorism. The percentage of Muslims who support violence is so small that you can't even see it. But if you see the extent that fear and alienation within our communities in Europe is happening, is unbelievable. So this is just an example of the magnitude. So what I'm pleading today here for the Slovenian friends to call for a round of process that aims for a Marshall Plan level of new restructuring of ways of working, including the MENA, Middle East, and Europe. If we don't prepare for this, and the cycle of migration, extremism, and conflicts cannot be stopped in one front, that would be my recommendation.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Al-Hakim.
Good morning. Nadir Hakim, the Secretary of I'tilaf. It means the opposition of Syrian people. I'tilaf is organized by 120 states in UN. Now I have got a question. It's mean for key word. Mediterranean. It's very good. I think that Syria is one part of Mediterranean. What are you doing for the Syrian people? Nothing. The route of safety. It's mean not immigration, refugees. I have one question. Why the Syrian people go out from Syria now? Nobody asks this question. The regime, the IS, killed the Syrian population. Since 2 years, the Nations United said we have 1 million half apartment destroyed. Now, if you somebody coming to see how the Syrian people live in the city boarding and inside of Syria. The third question, the education. Since 4 years, our children, our students, is stopped all. Nothing we are doing for him. And we ask, perhaps this population one day come dangerous for us and for you. The last word, the dignity and the dialogue. We needed the dialogue. We needed each one ask one question. If I have some possibility to help to stop this situation still now in Syria. The dangerous now for our population. But perhaps tomorrow will be arrived for each country. You needed your help, you needed your action. You not needed any new laws or decision. You need only apply the decision he already taken by European community, by different state of community. Madame Bourillon, for the regime, we have about 19 persons to take the bourse. We asked the bourse, but the bourse is stopped now. Also in Italy, also in Almain.
Thank you,
And
Dr.
so,
Hakim.
thanks for you.
So that they have time to respond. I'm taking a last question here. Is there any other question? Okay, and one in the back. Start, Summer, please.
I'm Summer School from Jordan. Sorry for my voice. It disappeared suddenly. Well, actually, I would like to comment about interfaith studies and intercultural learning. I hope and I wish that through this method and through these important topics, we can reach a point that we can separate religion from politics. And this also could be a method to end Islamophobia, because if religion is a personal belief, and if we reach this point that religion has nothing to do with politics and power, then Islamophobia and all religions phobia also will be minimized, I think. And I will not talk more, but I just want to make also one remark about when we are talking about intercultural dialogue between in crisis, in people who have a war and they have very sensitive issues. It's also very important to reconsider the psychological approach and to consider that sometimes people who were victimized and they went through war, they need to hear sorry. They need to hear the people care, the world care, there will be international courts, and we are sorry. Then invite them to an intercultural dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last intervention?
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, for
No,
your...
it's not working, this mic.
It is? Okay. Thank you, the panelists, for your comments and discussions and your thoughts. It's really, really good to have a dialogue. We have it right now here. We exchange our views and information, and which is very good. But this is going on, let's say, on strategic level. And it would be good if we could go a little bit down further on the terrain, or let's say on tactical level. If I may refer to the ISAF mission, of NATO ISAF mission in Afghanistan, he was also trying a comprehensive approach there. But when I was there on terrain, I saw that international organizations were not even speaking to each other. They didn't know what they do. They were all working on development projects, but they didn't know what one is doing and what the other is doing. And right now, we can see that Afghan people are coming here. So we have to ask ourselves, where did something went wrong? So, and we need to think back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have a challenge of having concluding remarks in 7 minutes. So if I may ask just for, again, I will have to resort to the old method of having only 3 to maximum 5 words from each panelist to sum up or to respond to something that was said. So I will start now from here. Ms. Hoffman, only 3 words.
There will be 2 words. Are we doing the right thing? And if we are not, more of doing the same help.
Very good. 3 words: sharing values, sharing interests, and enhancing dialogue.
Say media, because media, I think, needs to be part of the game and have a very active role. Sorry. Culture, because diversity and pluralism also is brought by culture. And third, scaling up action, because we have things, but we need to do much more.
Words would be trust, understanding, respect. But I have to answer a bit to the issues of the education. It's not only mid-term and long-term focus here we are creating, it's actually happening in courses, in curricula of different schools in different countries, in bilateral cooperation, in multilateral cooperation. For example, we are signing the agreement with Tunisia today. Why? Because we would like to enhance and to bring in Mediterranean and of course South-South and also South-North issues we all have here in education. So it is happening. And when the last question was focusing the technical level, I think there are many, many things going on really on daily basis. It's just a matter how we then see the macro picture of where we are heading. And this is where this strategic dialogue has to be our common tool to bring to the development. And therefore, thank you for the topic and thank you for really bringing up all of us and our thinking to bring to the better society. Thank you.
Let me just continue the minister's chain of thoughts, because we launched the Paris process just because of raising the awareness of the role of education systems in social cohesion and in tackling social problems, social frustration, economic frustration, alienation from democratic societies, and so on and so forth. And I think at European level, we can make a huge contribution in order to help member states to make their own education systems more inclusive, more flexible and more tolerant. And we haven't mentioned one element of the education system, and that's the preschool education, kindergartens. Kindergartens has an enormous role in educating and teaching basic social skills, tolerance, openness, and intercultural dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Swing, please.
Migration is inevitable given demography and other driving forces, including the disasters. It is necessary if skills are to be available, jobs filled, and economies to flourish. And it is absolutely desirable if we have the right policies, which means a high road policy that puts dialogue, cultural dialogue in the first place in order to, once again, to change that toxic narrative to a balanced historical narrative which says that migration has always been historically overwhelmingly positive. Many of our countries were built on the backs and with the minds of migrants. And finally, dialogue is going to be necessary if we're going to learn to basically to manage inexorably increasing multicultural societies.
Dr. Bark.
We were always firm believers that it's inevitable that to have stable and peaceful Europe, you need to have stability and peace also in the Mediterranean. And with today's globalization, we believe that also the other continents desires that our region is peaceful and stable. And that is why Malta is also looking forward to welcome the EU-Africa Summit and also CHOGM meeting to discuss international issues on our islands, and look forward then to preside for the first time over the Council of Ministers. Thank you.
I know that the things are very different if you're watching them from Syria, from Afghanistan, or from one of these countries. But I believe that one day will come also the time for reconciliation, but not without dialogue. But because I am a writer, I have the right to be Don Quixote, as we say. And in PEN International, we try to motivate United Nations to declare the right for peace. Thank you.
Professor Naim. Well, I think we need, as we all agree, that we need an intercultural and interfaith, but also I think also we need an intracultural and intra-faith dialogue. So we have to speak to our neighbors within these our countries, our communities. I think we need, as we say, unity in diversity, And I think unity again without uniformity. I think this is one of the challenges that we didn't tackle this morning, but uniformity unfortunately is applied in many places around the world, and we should not use uniformity and use unity instead. Thank you.
Madame Boyon, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, just to also to respond to the question on institution, that I think this work of coordination has started. It was in our meeting in July, we decided to do a first mapping of all initiatives, and I think having a debate like today is very encouraging to really go further in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we managed to finish the panel in 1 hour and a half. At the end of this discussion, I would like very much to thank my panelists for their insights and views into intercultural dialogue. That is probably the most important initiative that we should embark on today. As has been said, with all the challenges in the Mediterranean, today calls for dialogue between the cultures, dialogue between the faiths, interreligious tolerance, and understanding for each other. Finally, I'd like to thank my panelists, Professor Al-Naimi, the chairman of the Doha International Center in Qatar, Honorary A.M. Borg, Parliamentary Secretary of the EU Presidency 2017 for Malta, Ms. Delphine Borion, the Deputy Secretary General for Social and Civil Affairs at the Union for the Mediterranean, Mr. Mohammed Azdin Shleifa, State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Tunisia, Ms. Marjutka Hafner, Secretary General of the Slovenian National Commission for UNESCO, Dr. Maja Makovic-Brenčić, Minister for Education, Science and Sport, Republic of Slovenia, Dr. Tibor Navracis, European Commissioner for Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, Mr. Anton Peršak, the State Secretary of the Ministry of Culture for the Republic of Slovenia, and Ambassador William Lacey Swing, Director General of the International Organization of Migration. Please join me in thanking our panel.